And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 7 of our STEM Speakers series. Today, we are joined by our very own Spencer Rogers. Thank you for joining us, Spencer.
Hey guys, thanks. Thanks for having me.
So, one thing you guys might need to know about Spencer is not only does he work at RHP, but he is a professional drone flyer and soon-to-be top-selling recording artist. So he's got a lot going on in his life.
You said these weren't even the 3 things that we didn't know about.
You have been interested in engineering stuff and STEM little experiments your whole life, correct?
Yeah. I started doing my own like independent maker projects. Kind of without like the supervision of my parents or anything like that when I got into college. And the first one was building a trebuchet out of pretty much just the garbage that we could find around town. So like wooden shipping pallets, we found a, piece of pipe that we could cut, and we found all the tools that we were using too. And it was fun. I'm surprised nobody got hurt, which was a good thing, and it kind of worked. It almost kind of worked sometimes, but we didn't have any bearings. We didn't have, it was just drill a hole through a piece of lumber and everything like that. But had all the calculations, and we did all the calculations, and that was kind of like the first time that I had done a project that hadn't been kind of facilitated or overseen by my dad. Because I grew up doing those kinds of projects, which I guess maybe that's the third thing. I grew up doing this stuff, working in my dad's shop in our garage. He is an engineer. He's an aerospace engineer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of toys and stuff there, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. And he's made his living by inventing new techniques to measure the blades that are in turbine engines. So, the big turbine engines that are flying, they're powering jets.
Only engineers.
Thousands of these little tiny blades inside of them. And that's what makes all the thrust and suction and everything that makes them work. And he has machines that measure them down to, the micrometer.
Let's make this easy, okay, Spencer? You've been a maker all your life, period, okay? So this is something that you have gravitated to for a long, long time. Do you remember your first maker project when you were like 3 or maybe 5, maybe 10? I don't know. Can you think of your first maker project? The first thing you said, well, you know what? That doesn't work quite right.
I don't remember how old I was, but I had gotten like some Lego robot walker thing, and being an impatient youngling, like opened up the parts in the car or whatever and lost a bunch of pieces, so had to figure out how to make it work without those pieces and put it all together. And I remember it being very frustrating. But yeah.
So you
but
think
enough
you
to
were...
hook you for the rest of your life.
I guess so. So we get these magazines that had a bunch of little robots in them. And you could order and it would come in a little kit. But the instructions were translated 4 times over, and
those are the best ones.
Didn't quite. It was kind of just looking at the pictures, and the pictures didn't quite match what you got.
Right.
They kind of had to figure it out. I think we only got 1 or 2 of the dozen or so that we ever bought to work, but those were a lot of fun. And then after that, we built a go-kart, and that was the big project for a while. It was an electric go-kart that was big enough for me and my little brother to sit in together.
Cool.
Actually, the chassis for it and the motors are at the school by the STEM sheds, because last year Dre Kesswater was going to rebuild it as one of his robotics project, but was a little bit of a bigger project than he had expected.
You start making these things. At what point did you get into computers and that kind of area?
I really didn't really get into computers until college. I mean, we had them when I was in junior high and high school. My dad was an early adopter of computers back with the early Macs. And so we had one of those with,
Commodore 64.
I forget which one we finally got. I don't think we had a Commodore 64. But because it had an actual GUI and everything. We played like Math Rabbit and stuff like, learning games on it.
Yeah.
I think we had it because we lived on a boat when I was 4. Between 4 and 6, we lived on a boat up in British Columbia, cruising in the islands up there. I'm pretty sure we even had the computer on the boat, but I could be wrong about that. This is all, super, super young. And so computers were kind of always there, but I used them to do the other things that I wanted to do. If I needed to do research or, kind of started playing around with CAD software, computer assisted design software. By the time I got to middle school, the only computer, I guess I still had like a Mac at home, but we didn't have internet.
It sounds like you were definitely growing up as a native in computers, not an immigrant like myself, right? Who grew up without them, but you really kind of grew up with them. And I also see it in my own kids. They do things that other people needed to be taught, and they do them only not because they're so smart, they may or may not be, but because they've grown up with it and they take it for granted. And I think that's your native abilities in computers. You're saying you didn't put to use till you got like into college, but actually, the idea of a computer to do something else is advanced. That's an advanced thought, I
don't know. That actually kind of brings up something. And I mean, yeah, there is a lot of it that kind of comes intuitively once you've worked with computers, but I actually think that belief has been kind of dangerous for a lot of kids because it's meant that we've ignored a lot of basic computer skills. We assume that kids already know how to use a word processor, that they already know the basics of how to save their files and those kinds of things. And what's ending up happening is there's a lot of tools out there that they're not learning how to use because they're scratching the surface of everything, and that's enough to kind of make it look like they know what they're doing with it.
Sure.
But when they really get kind of let loose, and they stop being given templates for how they're supposed to write everything out, getting their formatting done on a Word document is, it's atrocious sometimes. And I've got friends my age that, they don't know how to back up their computer. They don't know that they should back up their computer. They've grown up with iCloud and everything like that. And so they don't think of anything. I mean, I guess they haven't grown up with iCloud. iCloud wasn't around until I was in college, but that's still enough time that most of us have become pretty dependent. I know even myself, I don't have the basic skill of memorizing a phone number anymore. I can't keep the 10 digits of a phone number straight in my head. I have to look back at the thing as I'm typing them into my phone. I get like 2 or 3 in. But
well, you don't need to, right? Everybody's got their phone. That's it.
Yeah.
I know offhand right now, probably like 3 phone numbers. One is my parents growing up, and my dad's office line too. I know that one. Then I know mine and my wife, and I think those are probably the 4 phone numbers I actually have memorized now.
I have 2. I have a few others memorized because they were interesting patterns, but I don't remember who they go to.
Right. Call them and
like
see.
I know somebody was 831-8331, but I don't know who that was.
So Spencer, so you had this maker attitude. You get into college, right? And what did you pursue in college? What what happened when you went there?
When I went into college, I was originally going in for marine biology. I mean, I grew up on boats, went to SEME every year growing up, which is over on Catalina Island, scuba dive, all that kind of stuff, and was sure I wanted to be a marine biologist. Ended up looking around at other stuff and had taken a astrophysics class early on, and that was a lot of fun. So I pursued that for a while. While I was doing that, I had made friends with some computer science guys. One of them convinced me to build a desktop because he wanted to play video games with me. And I didn't have a computer that could play video games. So he convinced me to build a desktop. We convinced my parents that I needed it so that I could run simulations for my astrophysics classes, but
Of course.
we weren't anything like that at that point.
That's what Walker said to me.
What?
That's what Walker said to me. Wait a minute.
Oh yeah, I think I might have used that argument when I was trying to convince
you
Walker
did.
But it ended up being a really good thing because it was the first desktop that I had ever built. It was also the first computer that I had ever had that didn't have a warranty on it, didn't have, Geek Squad protection or anything like that. So when things went wrong with it, the only people I had to turn to were my computer science friends and Google, and figure out how to fix it. And I didn't actually realize it until years later, but, through that process of just I have to figure this out right now or I don't have a computer, that I had actually learned how to fix computers and knew how they worked and everything. So years later, I went back to school online and got a degree in electronics engineering. And that's, essentially that stuff that I had started doing with my buddies up in Santa Cruz. And then, it took off, and ultimately, I was doing this while I was I was getting my degree while I was a learning specialist at Prep. And then once I got my degree, that was when they put me in charge of IT, and then robotics came after that. And so it kind of all built out of that, messing around with my buddies, building computers,
That's so cool. I think one of the things I'm taking from this is you've always had a lot of tools in your pocket, and you kind of have been using them in different ways. And now this is where you are using probably the tools that you love the most, actually.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely.
So you talked about your early projects. What's your latest side project that's going on?
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who goes to Prep knows that I've currently gotten pretty obsessed with drones. And so I've got, my main one that was coming with me to work every day, is currently in disrepair and is getting some new parts and everything. But then I also got all the pieces to build a new one. It's a little bit smaller but faster and
oh wow.
Do better.
So what's so how fast is that one going to go?
Probably break 100 miles an hour.
Wow.
What?
Is the hope. That's what I'm aiming for.
And how much will it weigh?
Like half a pound, maybe.
So tell me what happens to a half a pound. What happens to a half a pound object when it crashes at 100 miles per hour?
I thought that it was going to be really, really bad.
Yeah.
But these things are made out of carbon fiber.
Yeah. Okay.
So, I've gone straight on into a tree at full speed with my big one. And I mean, it breaks the propellers pretty good. But the drone itself tends to survive. The bad one that I've had, the battery is hanging on the bottom of it, and it gets strapped down, and I hit a branch and the battery shot off and flew out into a field and is still out in the field.
Fire.
You did not recover the
I
battery?
could not find it. I could not find it. It's like shoulder high, what was it? Mustard, the yellow flower.
Yeah. So Spencer, okay, so with your knowledge that you have in coding and all these technologies, and being an early adopter and probably who knows how many things in your life, where do you see this going? You could talk about drones, you could talk about maybe something else, but what 10 years from now, what's going to be happening?
How 10 years from now is going to be happening? Man, everybody who's tried to predict that in like the sci-fi world is always wrong. Um, we don't have flying cars and all that kind of stuff. I mean, 10 years from now, realistically speaking,
Am I going to have a hoverboard yet? Please.
no, I wish. I would love a hoverboard. We will probably, we already have some things that kind of do it, but I don't think we're not going to get the Marty McFly hoverboard. At least not for a while. We've got to figure out some new force of nature that would make that work. Or line all the streets with magnetic plates, which might have their own issues. Actually, the Future Cities kids last year did a lot of research on the effects of magnetic waves on people because they wanted their city to levitate above.
Right.
Okay, so what would be the benefits of levitating your city?
Earthquakes. It protected it from
Oh,
earthquakes. That was
okay.
yeah, it was a clever one.
Yeah.
But where are we going to be tech wise in 10 years? A lot more automation is probably, automation is going to be the big place to look at. I think actually technology, I'm hoping actually that in a lot of ways technology is going to slow down and let us catch up with it as far as, looking at our rules of ethics and stuff like that. Particularly talking about increasing automation, as we continue to increase automation, it takes away jobs, and living in a society where you are required to have a job to continue to live, we've got to kind of look at that balance and how to balance those things out as we're continuing to develop stuff.
So, we have you deal with a lot of high schoolers in robotics and in a lot of different ways, actually. You help a tremendous amount of our student population. For our seniors and our juniors, any advice for them as they go into the world as far as the maker spaces are concerned, or coding, or, those things that you're into? Any advice for them?
Google any question that comes into your head. Or try and find the answer to any question that comes into your head, no matter how stupid it seems, or silly or pointless. Just practicing that process of, oh, here's something I want to learn, and going through that whole discovery process. The more you do that, the more flexible your brain is, the easier it's going to be to continue to do that with more important things.
Well,
it's a lot easier to do it with silly stuff that kind of doesn't matter. It's easy to kind of work out those muscles a little bit. And so when the time comes to, really do it, you've got the skills in place.
You teach the design cycle right now. So that's really what you're talking about in many ways.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, that's a big piece of it. Yeah.
And I know you and I were just talking earlier about going down that wormhole. Is that what you meant?
Oh yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about. Yeah, what we used to, there was like the YouTube rabbit hole that we used to always talk about, that, you'd start watching a YouTube video and then, they'd mention some little topic, or Wikipedia was the fun one. Try and figure out how to connect two ideas on Wikipedia links. That it's like you had to start, it's kind of like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon or whatever.
Yeah.
But with anything on Wikipedia, and you have to try and figure out how to get from one concept to the next concept in the fewest numbers of clicks. And so you can end up anywhere once you start getting into that. But, and it's important to also, learn how to be organized. I mean, anybody who knows me knows that that's a weakness that I personally have, but it's still a valuable skill to continue to always work on, because it is so easy to get distracted and split out in so many different directions. But it's also important to sometimes kind of just ride that and go with it,
Sure.
have some fun.
Sure.
And yeah,
It's gotten you where you are right now, so it can't be all that bad.
Yeah.
Well, here's to hoping that we've got 200 students going down the STEM Expo 2020 rabbit hole in 2 weeks from today. So May 20th.
Excellent.
Feel free to explore that all you want, ladies and gentlemen. We've got plenty of hours worth of content for you.
Yeah, really. Well,
Well,
Spencer,
yeah.
I want to thank you so much for spending time with us. And
Thank you guys for having me.
on behalf of, I know, hundreds of students, appreciate you. They appreciate how you've turned them on to technology and STEM over these past years that you've been at Prep. And we all thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
All right. That's a wrap, ladies and gentlemen. You can see Spencer, Mr. Spencer, every Monday through Friday, RHP and Ren.
Here all week.